Final Fantasy VIII is a game that can be deconstructed and discussed any number of ways. As a clear anomaly of the series, in terms of structure and gameplay, both fans and dissenters alike tend to concede that it's a pretty weird game, and many of the vectors of weirdness tend to intersect with the main protagonist of Squall Leonhart. Now, Squall is a unique protagonist that took the stoic reserve established by Final Fantasy VII's Cloud Strife and amplified it to an immense degree, making it the cornerstone of Squall's personality and the foundation of his character arc, which takes him on a lengthy journey out of isolation, introversion, and distrust into someone who opens up to others by the end of the game. At face value, this may seem like an aspect of the story that is particular to Squall, without much bearing on broader events, but taking a step back, we can see how it is yet another example of Final Fantasy VIII's uniqueness and weirdness within the anthology, in how it upsets the established story beats and themes of other Final Fantasy games, and most specifically the ensemble party storylines and the Fellowship quest that made up most of the anthology games to this point. So, what we find in most Final Fantasy games, starting with Final Fantasy II, is a story that unfolds around an ensemble of characters, whether that's permanent party members that we acquire through the game, like in Final Fantasy VI, or a series of intermittent guest characters, like we have in Final Fantasy II. But regardless how these fellowships are formed, the purpose they serve in most instances is firstly to offer the player some variety in both battle gameplay and story, where they serve to expand our sense of the setting and the world, but also, from a narrative structure point of view, they are there to provide clarity and perspective on the events that are happening to us, potentially taking us into a new direction with guidance or side quests, and importantly, they work in key reprieves around the action to take stock of what's happening, communicate with the protagonist about what we should do next, which offers a sense of clarity and direction to the player. And a classic example of this is Final Fantasy X, where we have constant breaks along our adventure along these various high roads, which serve to build our hero's perceptions and understanding of Spira along with the summoner's journey. And likewise in Final Fantasy VI, where we are constantly fleeing the Gestalian Empire, our characters have to frequently stop, pivot, and decide on a coin toss what to do next. So those are two very stark instances of how the Fellowship works in service of a story. Additionally, as Final Fantasy matured and hero characters began to take centre stage with their own unique story arcs and personalities, starting with Cecil in Final Fantasy IV, the Fellowship party members also worked in service of that, reflecting opinions and advice back onto the protagonist, helping shape their story and build out the player's perceptions of these characters. One of the most successful examples of this is of course Cloud Strife in Final Fantasy VII and his complex arc of this muddled personality mercenary, where to Tifa he is the boy next door from her childhood, and yet to Barrett Wallace he is this cool reserved soldier, and the Fellowship party members converge to explore who this character is, who this hero is, with a notable instance early in the game being the Fellowship characters asking Cloud to recite his backstory once we get to the inn in the village of Calm. So whether it's to do with a central hero's backstory or a party deciding what in the world to do next, the point is, with these fellowships there is dialogue, they discuss things together and they give us a sense of the world, setting, character and direction. Looping back to Final Fantasy VIII, Squall, by virtue of being a hero character that pushes others away and barely talks to anyone if he can help it, this upends the idea of a fellowship that has persisted through Final Fantasy since the earliest games. And what we have here instead is an isolated central character and then everyone else. The rub here comes when trying to square the circle of delivering a good epic fantasy story and a sense of pace and progression within that with an unwilling hero. It's hard to give a sense of clarity and development to a story if we don't have these moments of reflection and to take stock through a vehicle such as the Fellowship Party. And this is where Squall's inner monologue comes into play. Now, Squall's inner thoughts being shown to the player is one of the first and certainly the most prevalent instances of such to feature in a Final Fantasy game. These monologues serve a few purposes which are both comedic, such as his observations of Laguna during the Laguna dreams, but also dramatic, such as his existential meltdown when he thinks that Cypher has been killed. But chiefly, what these inner monologues are doing is providing a surrogate for the dialogue, the banter, and the emotive relationships that are usually built up between the Fellowship party in a Final Fantasy game. Taking the aforementioned instance of Final Fantasy VII, when the party arrive at Calm, it is through mutual discussion and consent that they reflect on their escape from Midgar and decide to refocus their efforts on tracking down Sephiroth. In Final Fantasy VIII, by comparison, we have recurring instances of Squall waking up in his dorm room, laying on his bed alone to take stock of a situation by himself, whether that's reflecting on what's happened with Sorceress Edia's powers, learning who Alone is, or considering the fallout of crashing into Fisherman's Horizon. These natural reprieves that come after dramatic moments of the game story are usually considered by Squall by himself, and as an inversion to the classic Fellowship parley that happens in these intermissions, it is actually usually the party members, like Zell or Rinoa or Selphie, who come to interrupt these moments where Squall is taking stock by knocking on his door, inviting him to go training, inviting him to a mission, and so on. And in the fleeting instances where the party does collude and dialogue together with Squall to make a spur-of-the-moment decision, it again, in its own way, reinforces Squall's cold and logical state to other people, such as when we detour after the fallout of the Timber mission and decide to go to Galbadia Garden. This comes about by Quistis asking Squall to recite something from the Balamb Garden Code of what to do in an emergency, and that's entirely what prompts that course of action. There is no dialoguing, there is no parley, it is simply Squall robotically responding to orders. So the inner monologues are fascinating in Final Fantasy VIII. They have, as I say, a very unique inclusion that attempt to maintain a semblance of clarity and structure to the story with a character who is not naturally forthcoming to a Fellowship party. And a common complaint that I've addressed on the channel in the past is around the party all being stock characters and ancillary to Squall's story, and not having the same extent of side quest or personal backstory dedicated to them, such as we see in other games. Now, I don't wholly disagree with that, because of course we see this game from Squall's perspective, and most of the bandwidth, whether it's Squall's flashback dreams to his childhood, his tirades about not relying on other people, it's the foundation of his character from which we jump off and sort of grow over the course of this game story, of course after he meets Rinoa. So instead of the conventional Fellowship quest, it is something that is serviced, as I say, by this innovative inner monologue that features through the game, and is an understated but I think incredibly important facet of how we understand Squall's character, but also how the story is told in FF8. And just as a thought experiment, if you picture Final Fantasy VIII playing out without having Squall's inner monologue there, it would be a completely different experience if we are not learning about Squall from a first-person perspective. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider joining me on Patreon. Alternatively, if you feel like donating me a coffee, you can do so. The links are available below.